How's it going with my SAAB friends? My name is Gary and this is my channel, Weakest of Weeks. If you're a first-time viewer, I appreciate you clicking on the video and definitely consider subscribing. I have a ton of how-to stuff out there and especially SAAB-related videos. So in this video, for the most part, you're probably not going to see my face, but you're going to see my filthy body because what I ended up doing in the last video, if you've seen that one, is crawl underneath the car and remove this OEM fuel pump assembly. And today I'm here to tell you, I am that one psychopath out there that is actually going to rebuild this assembly. So not only rebuild it, but also upgrade it. And installing this AEM 50-1000 fuel pump, this one is gonna be worked a lot less than, say, an original unit. I'm gonna be upgrading it. It's also cheaper than to replace the full-on assembly. Along with that AEM pump, some new flex hose. This is identical to the OEM one. I have a heat gun to help heat this up to hopefully slide it on there. I purchased a couple of them because more than likely I'm gonna screw this up. I have a new fuel float assembly. This one, there's no issue, but since I'm in here, it's cheap enough. Might as well just replace it because it's such a common issue, and it also comes with a new fuel tank ring. I have some OEM connectors that we will crimp onto this AEM harness. That way it plugs directly into this fuel pump so we don't have to solder or butt connect anything like that. And then I have some fuel clips in case we need them. And this is what we have. Links for all this stuff will be in the description. I'll quit rambling. Let's go ahead and tear this OEM assembly to pieces. So we want to take our time here with disassembly, mainly because this is a old unit and the plastic, because of the age and being in fuel, it can be rather brittle. I'm gonna try to get my little screwdriver in here, free up some of these tabs. Now I need to get a fuel clip off this line all the way up in here. It's a black clip. Just popped out, which looks like I broke it. It's one of these fuel line clips. I'll set to the side so I can match it up. That gets this line out of the way. We should be able to lift up on the top of this assembly. And in here, there is one connector. Let's pull it down. And the top portion of this assembly should now be free. And then, if you're wondering, the side with the spring goes right where this metal clip is. I assume it's a ground of some sort. We'll set this assembly to the side, at least the top portion. So I know it's probably difficult to pick up on camera, but whenever that top hat was on here, what I was doing was gently sticking the screwdriver in here like this, and then freeing it up. That way that tab for that gray piece comes off, and you do that 3 times. So this is what we're left with. This is the actual electric fuel pump, whereas the rest of this is just the assembly. So it looks like we can disassemble this further by undoing these 4 tabs right here on each side. This is kind of tricky, so I'm gonna stick some eyeglass screwdrivers in each one of these by the tabs to free it, because I don't think I can simultaneously undo all of these. But you can use anything like little screwdrivers like this, or even say probably like a toothpick. We got it. Now we got a bunch of little screwdrivers soaked in fuel. Float. These wires, it doesn't matter which way they go, but what does matter is what slots they go into. I prefer to leave it connected for now, but we'll see how far we get. Oh man. Let me show you all of the sediment in here. Look at this. So, folks, this is why you replace your fuel strainer. Look at that. There is a bunch of crud on the bottom of that. Like, look at that. That's crazy. And then look at inside here. Look at all the junk. Any of that junk can cause fuel starvation issues. This is kind of interesting to see all this junk in here, and this is honestly probably why people replace all this in one fell swoop. But like I said, I just want to upgrade it with a different unit that is not going to be as pushed to the limits as, say, the OEM one, and I have all the parts here already. So we'll go ahead and disassemble this pump further to get the actual electrical unit out of here, which should just be this little tab here, and that should slide out after we pop this fuel strainer off. But yeah, once we get that done, man, we're gonna have to do some serious cleaning. Nasty. Broke that little tab off the bottom of this, but we don't need that where we're going. Up on that. All right, look at that. In case you're wondering, the original unit in my car is a Walbro fuel pump. As far as I know, this is the original fuel pump assembly to the car. Now we are on to removing this hose, removing these electrical clips, in reverse order. All right, so that did the trick. New hose, and fingers crossed this works. Ended up doing a little work off camera, added a worm drive clamp here that came in the AEM fuel pump kit. I don't think that's gonna really be required, but just a little extra insurance. I did get the new AEM fuel pump in here, and what I ended up doing is it comes with a slew of different stuff like this rubber collar and this like foam piece. So I ended up cutting the foam piece in half, sliding it over the fuel pump and slipping it down in here. And for the time being, this is exactly how I have it oriented. So this fuel line is to go right there. And then, you know, that's the electrical connector. So I spent a little bit of time. It's kind of finicky because I plan to use the fuel strainer, the fuel sock that came with the kit, and it will clip right here. It actually needs to be oriented a certain direction. Ideally, like the fuel strainer to sit basically like that. If it's oriented the wrong way, then it's going to sit like this, and it's going to be like at a 90 degree, and that's just not ideal. So here's a closer look at what I did, just a little section right here, and I think that just adds a little bit of thickness, and it takes care of any slop there. So now we're good to heat up this hose and squish it onto here. Here is the inside all cleaned up, much better. I put a little bit of oil on the O-ring. And speaking of this part in the right frame of the video here, that cap actually removes, exposing an internal filter seen in the left frame. Now, I did not realize this until days later after my car was back up and running. I was not experiencing any issues whatsoever. It just so happened to be I was on a SAAB forum helping out some fellow posters with their fuel pump issues, and that specific person decided to disassemble their fuel pump even further than what I ended up with. Any word of advice here I can give would be to take some extra time, expose this internal filter, pull any part numbers if possible off of it to then cross-reference and replace before carrying on with the rest of the rebuild. You just need to be careful because the O-ring tends to get stuck down in here. So I took it out, put a little oil on there after cleaning it, and then put that back on. Oh, and in case you're wondering, so this one went actually pretty well, but it is my second attempt. This was the first one that I tried to do, and I just overheated this and it became way too pliable. If you think I got this perfect on the first try, that is not the case. I actually ordered 3 of these. I got it right on the second try. Now we're on to the electrical connector. Positive on this side, and this side is negative. which coincides with the red and black. Clip that in, red positive, black negative. Apologize if I sound muffled, I kind of am. I have a mask on because of just fuel vapors and brake clean and such, but this is going to be the positive, this is going to be the negative. How I know that is the black wire usually does signify a ground or an earth. Well, it actually travels to this spot right here, which is a grounding piece, which also goes to this. So that confirms that this black will go in place of this. This red will go in place of this. We need to de-pin this. Get a small flat blade screwdriver, pry up on that little reddish orange connector. There's a small tab. That pops out like such. We'll kind of untangle this a little bit here. And we'll go this way. Alright, so there's the original wire. Here's a set of ends that I'll use to crimp on there. These I got from Moser Electronics. I'll have the part number in the description, but you only need 2 of them. I ended up ordering 4 just in case something were to happen. And in case you don't believe me that they are the original ones. Beautiful. Actually, off camera, I ended up cutting that first one I did. Because I have extras, I decided to give it another go. And this one actually turned out, I think, perfect. The issue that I had on the first one, I didn't have all these core wires in underneath here, so I didn't like that, so I snipped it off, restripped it, give it another crimp. That is perfect, good to go. So now, before we do the negative, I'll go ahead and put this positive wire in place. Okay, that is in. Now we're good to remove this negative one. Now the negative one does have a smaller wire along with it. So we'll just have to remember to crimp that additional wire when we do this connector. Snip this as close to the end as possible. Set that wire to the side. Now I'll just strip both of these. Alright, that one is on. Not perfect by any means, but I don't think that's going anywhere. So we'll go ahead, stick that in there. That is nice and locked into place. So that does it for this portion. Now I think we're good to install the strainer. And there's a very, very small clip that comes with it. Before I touch this, I want to put some different gloves on because I don't want to get it all grimy. Alright, much better. So because there is a little bit of play, a little bit of up and down movement, because this is just a smidge shorter, this is not doing exactly what I wanted to, so I'm actually going to add a clamp. Might sound ridiculous, I'm not entirely sure, but I know once I have this clamp in here, it's not going to move anymore. And if you're wondering for size, this is 25 to 51 millimeter. And I'm just gonna do one of these, see if I can get it in behind here and around. Messed around with this hose clamp deal. This section butts up against underneath here, because what was happening is because it's a little bit too short, it wants to wander upwards a little bit, and doing a clamp like that, it can't go up any higher because this section hits underneath this assembly. So it's not the prettiest thing by any means, but it's pretty sturdy. This is all cleaned up, so now we're good to set this down. As far as alignment goes, it only goes one way. I'll end up pushing it down and all 4 of these tabs will clip into place. Don't want to pinch my glove in there though. So that is all clipped in, all 4 of these. That's what it looks like. You can see the hose clamp is kind of close, but it's not interfering with anything. So what we're left with, obviously need to clean the outside of this. Alright, so pretty simple. Just one tab here, you just push that in and force this assembly downward. Alright, new one's not overly difficult. So that's kind of how I have the wires ran. It sits like this, does one of these guys, and that's what gets worn out. We are just going to replace it anyways. Alright, so that's how I have the wires. They go up, clip into there. This little float guy does one of these multiple times, and that's what wears out these contacts here, and that's what causes all the issues. But it's nice, it is replaceable, just unfortunate that you have to drop the fuel tank to do this whole procedure. Pick a wire, any wire. I'm gonna do this one right here. So we lift up on that. Voila. Make sure I see the orientation. And this final wire. Got this top section, it's cleaned up a little bit. I didn't want to hit this top piece with brake clean directly, mainly because the sensor, electrical connectors, and there's some O-rings and stuff. So I just cleaned it a little bit. The main thing I cleaned was on the inside here. Now we're ready to set this into place. Important things to mention is one of these three pegs has a spring. It only goes, or it should only go, to the one with the large spade connector thing going on there. And then it's pretty simple because this giant cylinder goes right in this recess, so it only orients one way. Now one thing kind of weird is this guy actually goes to the outside of this one peg, and then it goes up, and then you use a clip. For clips, because if you remember I broke it, I'm using this Dorman assortment of 3/8 and 5/16. So this is a 5/16 Ford clip, believe it or not. It's going to be probably impossible to film. But before I clip everything down, I want to, one, clip in this fuel clip, an electrical clip, and then you're good for this. It goes to the outside of this one peg, and this is where it gets rather tricky. It won't fully seat until you push it up, and then once that is pushed up, you can then push the clip in, and unfortunately you're not going to be able to really see that. But it is clipped in. Should be good to push this down, making sure the three pegs are aligned. Okay, so now we just need to verify, double check our work. Fuel float, it's free of obstructions. Cables run down, get clipped into there. Go into the electrical harness, the two in the middle, doesn't matter what orientation. You have the two, the positive, red, and the black ground or earth. Going down to the new AEM fuel pump, that looks good. I think I'll give this one more once over with some brake clean on a shop towel just to make sure everything is a-okay. So that is a wrap on the rebuild of this fuel pump assembly as well as the upgrade. Now this will work on any new Gen 9.3 4-cylinder or V6 front-wheel drive. The cross-wheel drive models, those are the all-wheel drive ones. They have a drive shaft that runs front to rear. Because of that, they have a relief in the fuel tank. It's set up a bit different, and it's my understanding the fuel pump assemblies are set up differently as well. But I imagine like any GM model of that era, they will share some similarities to the fuel pump assembly that you see in front of your eyes. With that being said, I'm not going to have some fun, happy smiles to frowny face difficulty scale, because let's be honest, when you're dealing with dropping a fuel tank, splashing around fuel, rolling around on the cold hard concrete, it's frowny faces all day long. Just know it's an extremely large commitment if you decide to drop the tank, pull this assembly out just to replace the fuel float. I have to laugh because 3 years ago, that's exactly what I ended up doing when I bought my 08 93 Aero, my laser red car here. Less than 24 hours into ownership, I realized that the fuel gauge was faulty. After some quick research, I realized it's an extremely common issue. Back then, I was more than content with just doing that fuel float. If I knew then what I know now, would I have changed anything? Probably not, because back then the car was 100% stock. I figured it'd be my daily driver till I drove the wheels off of it, or until it withered away and rusted back to the earth that it came from. So was I happy then to do it? Not necessarily. It wasn't exactly a fun job, but I'm definitely glad that it took 3 years to now run into further issues with the fuel pump. So then the car was 100% stock. Now the car is full bolt-on, big turbo. Fuel gauge is still going strong, so I'm happy with that. Unfortunately, because it's commanding so much more out of this old stock fuel pump, I think is why I'm running into that P0089 code. Now, it's also a common code for a lot of SAAB owners with a fuel pump that is becoming older of age. Also, I think if you have any sediment in your tank, think of like a kinked straw. It's just requiring more out of that fuel pump. So if you're 100% stock, or if you're like myself with a bunch of bolt-ons and a big turbo, I think the full-on rebuild is a good alternative to just replacing the stock assembly, because I highly recommend not to go with anything aftermarket, because I've heard nothing but terrible things with that. But I think the AEM upgrade is great if you're 100% stock, because you're going to be commanding less out of that fuel pump. And in the future, if you do decide to go full bolt-on at the flick of a switch with a tune and obviously the time to do said bolt-ons, you're going to have a lot of time saved by not having to drop the tank ever again by just installing this. It's going to be well worth the time and investment. Granted, it is a heck of a repair and upgrade to do, but hopefully in theory, it's going to be the last fuel pump I will ever have to do, and anybody watching that decides to go with this AEM pump will ever have to do as well. Cautionary word of advice, along with all that's already been said: definitely spend some extra money and buy some extra corrugated nylon tube. I ended up buying 3 of these. First one I butchered, I overheated it with the heat gun, so I'm definitely glad I ended up buying 3 of them. One I threw out, one is on here currently. This is the third and the extra, but these are only $3.50, give or take, plus shipping US. So definitely well worth it to have extras. Also, speaking of extras, buy some extra OEM electrical connectors, these Moser Electronics crimp connectors. I bought, say, 4 or 5 of them. The first 2 I crimped on, I wasn't 100% happy with my work. There was a couple strands of the core of that wire that were hanging out. I decided to take the time to lob those off and re-crimp the new ones on there. So definitely happy I have extras of those. Something also to consider is to have these on hand, these Dorman fuel line connectors. Now these, if you don't initially buy, you can probably find them at your local brick and mortar auto parts store. Dorman being a great aftermarket solution to OEM companies. They have a lot of stuff in local auto parts stores, so you can probably find those local. Speaking of Dorman, this fuel float, while your stores may not have those local, they should be able to get that relatively quickly, because it is on other vehicles. I think the Malibu and Impala share the exact same float. Now, the only thing that you're probably not going to find local, for me, I was able to because I have a couple performance shops like JAGS and Summit Racing local to me in Ohio. I was able to get this AEM fuel pump within a day or two local to me. But regardless, JAGS, Summit Racing, Amazon, eBay, whatever the case may be, they'll be able to ship it to your door, and it's very reasonably priced compared to replacing this entire assembly. So yes, it's a heck of a lot of work to go about rebuilding this entire thing with cobbled up pieces and components. But in theory, this will be the last fuel pump we'll ever need to do. It's going to do well more than the stock fuel pump could ever do. And I'll link all this stuff in the description. If you found this helpful, give it a thumbs up. Definitely consider subscribing. If you're interested in how I pulled this fuel pump out and how it's going to go back into the vehicle, also look at the links in the description because I will have a video for that as well. I do apologize for a really annoying cricket in the background in the condition that I look right now because, quite honestly, I've been rolling around on the ground. I've had fuel spill on me, so I'm absolutely filthy. The white shirt wasn't the best idea in the world, and also I smell horrible. I reek of fuel, but that's to be expected dealing with a fuel pump assembly. So just be glad that you don't have smell-o-vision. That's all I'm saying. Anyways, I'll cut the video here. I appreciate you watching. Have any questions, comments, concerns, drop a comment down below, and I will catch you friends on the next one.